Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is your astrological anchorman, Darren Lamont, with a new edition of Astrovisions. Man, the news is happening so fast that I can't even get through a video and then get ready to post it without seeing that something has already taken place. All right, so I'm just going to try to keep this brief. The month of April is going to be rough. Okay, we have a full moon on April 7th with Scorpio rising. Anytime there's a full moon rising, anytime Scorpio is rising, or for that matter, a fixed sign is rising, whatever was going on in the previous lunation in the previous month continues on. Okay, we're going to have two lunations, both the full moon on the 7th and the new moon on the 22nd, both with Scorpio rising, so more of the same, more of the same. All right. In the full moon version of, in the full moon chart, which takes place on the 7th, we can anticipate a lot of stuff. Some of this stuff has already taken place. Those of you who follow me on Facebook saw that I was writing about this on the 27th and the 28th, and I was writing about these lunations, and things have already started taking place. Okay, so with the full moon, with the Scorpio rising and Mars in the third house, this indicates a high mortality rate because the third house does rule mortality rates as well as the stock market. It also rules insurance companies and all banks. Okay, it rules stock markets on both domestic, in both the domestic world and in the international world. So for the investors out there, continue to look for short positions. Do not be long in anything because this is going to be a very volatile time. This is going to be a very volatile year for the stock market. There will be news stories happening all the time that's going to turn the markets down. So don't stay in. If you're in if you are in long positions, be in those positions for scalping, as opposed to trying to go back up to 330,000 with the stock market 29,000. We're not going to see that anymore. It'll be a long time. We're going to see that again. All right. So be looking short. Okay. We can expect life insurance companies to be stressed, and some of them may not pay out. There are going to be some claims that are going to be denied because there's going to be so much death. There's going to be so much death that some of these claims will be denied. All right. There's also indications of possible suicides. There will be some talk of frozen assets, maybe for someone who committed a crime. There may be news stories about the national debt, so let's look for that as well. Now, the full moon is in the 11th house of the full moon chart, and this puts Congress on center stage, and lawmakers in general, both local, state, and federal lawmakers. Also, this puts committees, community organizers, and the national treasury in focus. All right. The moon is afflicted by its association with an opposition to the sun, and this suggests a loss of power to the nation in some way. This can speak to perhaps party dissensions, people leaving the party, or scandals. Today, there's already talk of a scandal that was whispered on the 26th of March regarding Joe Biden, and there's people pushing back. Joe Biden fans are pushing back against that, saying, well, Donald Trump was guilty of the same thing. Well, it doesn't matter. This may be the beginning of the end for Mr. Biden. I'm not so certain that Biden's health is well, and we shall see. I think we'll know the full story of this by the time we get to August, when the sun starts to square his natal sun. I think we'll know by August what's going on with Biden. Probably even before then, what's going on with Biden. All right. So there's going to be disagreements, possibly scandals in Congress. There are always disagreements with those folks in Congress. So to say that it's not going to be a surprise. It's not a big breaking news story. We've seen dissension for the last 30 years in Congress with the polarized nature that our politics has become. Also, with the moon here and in opposition to the sun, we can expect more illnesses and sickness among members of Congress, and I think Mr. Biden is one of those. Also, we're going to hear about more congressmen and senators contracting or being told that they have the coronavirus, and it's a very strong possibility that somebody in Congress may expire during this period. We'll hear more news in this month of April. By the way, today is March 31st. Tomorrow is April 1st, of course, and April Fool's Day has been canceled. It's officially canceled. Because this entire year has been mother jugger. We are living in historic times, and nothing that we call normal we will likely ever see again. And things are certainly changing. Okay, so with the opposition to the sun from the moon, this normally denotes worker strikes. There's already talk of the Whole Food workers going on a strike. On the East Coast somewhere yesterday, a manager was fired by Amazon because he led a walkout, and we're going to hear more of this kind of stuff. There's a grocery store chain here in St. Louis who's disgruntled because of their treatment, not only by the citizens who are terribly ungrateful, but also by the store itself, because they are not doing their able best to protect their workers, and they are essential, So we can expect to hear more of that in the coming days and weeks over the course of this month. All right, the moon is also in a quincunx to Neptune, with the moon in Virgo and Neptune in Sidereal Aquarius. There's inharmony and division between the people and the rulers. Of course, half of the populace is divided with in the camps of pro-Trump versus anti-Trump, and then you have a very small segment who really don't care. I'm in that camp. I really don't care. I don't like either party. I have never liked Donald Trump. Going all the way back to the 80s. It's personal with me. When he destroyed the USFL back in the 1980s, I've never been a fan of him ever since. And I've never been one who rode his jock because he was a so-called self-made man. Anyway, the division between the parties will continue on even amongst the people. Okay, this quincunx with the moon and Neptune also speaks to the health of the nation, and it shall continue to suffer. All right, we're going to continue seeing the virus numbers of those infected get worse. And we will continue to see people dying. We're going to hear more and more of do not resuscitate orders being given across hospitals because they become stressed. We are going to hear of collapses collapses in nursing homes and elderly care facilities. It's just going to be an awful month. And even bad weather like not hurricanes, but tornadoes and thunderstorms and things of that nature could occur, and that causes some death as well. Now, with the sun in the 5th house and ruling the 10th house, the sun is actually accidentally exalted because the sun naturally rules the 5th house by its association with Leo. However, in the sidereal measure, the sun is in the sign of Pisces and in the 5th house, and this speaks to some sort of scandal being bandied about sometime this month. We might have to go looking for that because the media is not going to give us that kind of thing unless it's a bombshell. But there's indications of scandals connected to women and children, and this could also relate to a measure of child trafficking or sexual assault. Again, Joe Biden just came up this morning in the news on Yahoo of an allegation of sexual assault or sexual misconduct and we'll see how that plays out. Okay, the sun here in the fifth house also speaks to losses in Hollywood. This could be the production companies talking about how they've lost money, theaters perhaps losing money because, or because they don't make the money. They'll easily say they lost money, because of the quarantine. There's not going to be a lot of money made during this cycle. Now, the sun here also suggests that we could hear of an illness or a death among a famed actor, singer, playwright, athlete, even an actress. There could be somebody succumbing to some sort of illness, possibly again related to a lot of illnesses these days are going to be, and a lot of deaths are going to be contributed to and given credit for that death by the coronavirus. And we will never know for certain that the coronavirus is the reason why these folks died, but it'll certainly get the credit for the death. So again, we could learn of an athlete, a singer, songwriter, playwright, actor, actress, producer, someone in the entertainment industry, possibly well-famed, very famous, dying during this period, but it could be of some other cause. But of course, the media sensationalizes everything. Therefore, they'll get the credit, they'll give the credit of the death to the coronavirus. The third house of this chart is loaded with Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto there. And because the full moon occurs at nighttime, this is a nighttime chart, and Saturn is the big kahuna in this chart, okay? And with Saturn ruling this chart with Capricorn there, Jupiter, Mars, and Pluto all there, this has the potential to be really, really ugly. Now, the third house rules neighborhoods, roads, and the highways that connect the neighborhoods, okay? It also rules all forms of media and transportation, as well as the Postal Service, Amazon, FedEx, UPS, and the like. It also rules the media, all forms of media. That is the mass media, television and radio, print, broadcast, you name it, as well as social media, okay? So we can expect, first off, with regards to our neighborhoods. So, blue state, red state, blue state, red state. The blue states do too much and the red states do too little. In this month, we are going to see the heavy hand of certain governments in blue states come down on our neighborhoods to enforce the quarantine. Okay, there may also be on some level protests and riots in blue state neighborhoods. Okay, and to a certain extent this could happen in red states as well, but I think it's going to play out more in blue states. With Mars here and with Saturn here in the third house, we're certainly going to see a police effort to control people. The quarantine will continue on through this month and into next month. There's talk the other day that it's going to end around April 30th. I think April 30th is when things will start to loosen up, but it's not going to completely end all over the nation by April 30th. This thing is going to take place well into May, and in some places into June. Okay, it'll be close to July, or possibly even in July, when whatever normal is, we will return to it. Right. So with this third house indication here, we'll see forced quarantines in some places. We will see roadblocks and checkpoints. That's already taken place. That started over the weekend. In Rhode Island, they are pulling over New York residents, people with New York plates, and telling them to quarantine in place for a minimum of 14 days. And they're also doing that in states like Florida. We can expect to see possibly The states surrounding Illinois do the same thing. That would be places like Indiana, Missouri, Kentucky, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, because Ohio borders Michigan. We'll probably see them do the quarantine as well, stop blocking people both coming out of New York and out of Michigan into Ohio to try to keep the numbers down. So we're going to see, this is some version of martial law. It's not like we have been programmed where it'll be a heavy hand of the police. However, in some places, in select areas, in isolated places, there will be the heavy hand of the law enforcement coming down on the citizens of select areas. And I think this will take place in blue states. Now, the third house also gives indications, this stellium of planets, this grouping of planets in the third house that also rules transportation, speaks to troubles in delivery services, possibly accidents on the railroads. We may see some delays in our mail. I'm still anticipating this. I called for it last month, and I'm calling for it again this month. Some sort of delays somewhere in the country where the Postal Service is stressed because people are ill, or even they might be overworked. Who knows? I don't know how it's going to play out, but we may see some troubles with regards to getting our goods delivered on some level. All right, the Mars here in conjunction with Saturn, and by virtue of the square to Uranus in the sixth house in Aries. And we'll talk more about that later on, but just for the sake of this piece right here in the third house, we could see some accidents on the railroad. Okay, there could be a train derailment somewhere in the United States. I doubt it's going to be a passenger train, because I don't think they are running as regularly and as crowded as they would normally be, especially in populated areas. I don't know that it'll be there, but it's a possibility that it could be a commuter train as well, but albeit unlikely. It's more likely going to be a rail, a commercial train carrying goods and products somewhere across the nation, that on some kind of way there's going to be an accident on the rails. Okay. Also, losses in media, revenues may be down. We can expect an internet outage on some level. I don't think it'll be the government pulling the plug. I think it'll be the service crashing because of the heavy use, with everybody being at home quarantined and looking for entertainment and entertaining themselves on some level, be it social media, YouTube, or otherwise streaming services. I think there could be a failure of the internet on some level. There could also be a telephone service provider like Sprint, T-Mobile, AT&T. They have troubles. I think this morning there was a report of T-Mobile having issues somewhere in the country. I'll have to vet that to check that out for certain, but I believe I saw a headline this morning where T-Mobile was having service issues somewhere. We can expect more of that, simply because it's just overstressed with everybody using it. The third house with these planets here also suggests a death of a journalist. We already saw one on Friday or Saturday. I forget her name, but she's a CBS correspondent. She's 54 years old, and she died of complications. They gave credit for that to the coronavirus. Also this morning, Chris Cuomo, anchorman on one of the news entertainment shows on CNN, is self-quarantining because he's tested positive for the coronavirus. All these people are getting tests behind me. Anyway, there could be more reports of deaths of journalists, broadcasters, or famed authors, writers of any kind and all kinds, or a famed educator, or even a controversial figure in the media. This could speak to Mr. Limbaugh having complications with his lung cancer. I believe it is. He's suffering from lung cancer. We could hear a worsening condition about that as we draw closer to the square to his sun. He's a Capricorn, so Aries is about to kick in here in later in April. There could be some complications to his health, okay, with the square to his Capricorn placements. All right. There could also be with Mars here in the third house a report of a fire to the third house entity. This could be a fire in a broadcast center, a fire in a school. Thankfully kids won't be in school, but there could be a fire to a third house entity. There could even be it could even happen in a warehouse, like an Amazon warehouse. And if that happens, I wouldn't be surprised if they learn that it's arson or sabotage, right? So let's see how that plays out. Rail companies and auto manufacturers, although GM had some shares to go up here recently, saw their shares go up, we could learn of a rail company or an auto manufacturer losing money, or even their shares losing value. The third house here also speaks to worker strikes or work stoppages or discontentment amongst workers. Okay, again, Whole Foods and Amazon have already expressed some displeasure with their bosses and their leaders in terms of their working conditions. Okay, now Jupiter is here and in detriment. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer and in detriment here in Capricorn. And because he has to lend his power to Saturn, there could be problems among the clergy. Now, we already saw down in Florida a preacher, a pastor, got arrested for for having church against the quarantine. Take it at home, buddy. Do it. Take it. Make it online. All you preachers out there who happen to stumble up on this, don't get caught up trying to think your God is more powerful than the heavy hand of the government. All right, you know better. Jesus caught hell from the government. You're no better. So stand by for that. Take it. Make it online, man. Save yourself. Okay. Saturn is in the house that rules neighborhoods. So there's going to be more checkpoints. It's going to be, it's just not good for travel. You'll probably see people getting pulled over with out-of-state license plates coming from places that are heavily infected, and police pulling you over. Again, Saturn here and Jupiter here, because Jupiter rules publishing from the ninth house perspective. And broadcasting on a wide level. We can learn of a death of a publisher, death of a broadcaster, or a publishing company of some sort could announce that they are going out of business. This could be a newspaper or magazine saying, look, we're pulling the plug because we did not adjust to the new technology. We're catching hell, so they pull the plug and say we're going out of business. We can learn of that as well. I doubt that happens this month, but it's possible. Lastly, there could be difficulties connected to religion, more along the lines of what happened with that one preacher down there in Tampa, Florida. All right, continuing on with the full moon chart. We're talking about the fourth house of this full moon chart for April 7th. And now the only difference between this chart on April 7th, which is the full moon, and the new moon on the 22nd, which is technically a dark moon. The biggest difference between these two charts is that the moon and the sun in this chart for the 7th are in the 11th house for the moon, 5th house for the sun, and in the new moon chart for April 22nd, they will both be in the 6th house. All right, everything else is going to be the same. So for the most part, what's indicated in this chart can also play out in the full moon chart on the 22nd. Now to the 4th house. All I have to say about this is that Neptune here does indicate the potential for rain, high winds, and tornadoes, which is nothing out of the ordinary for April across the United States. Nothing out of the ordinary here. However, this could be a pretty bad year in terms of tornadoes. Let's see how it plays out. We've already seen tornadoes run through the Midwest and the upper South this past weekend. There was a notable tornado that struck Little Rock, Arkansas on, I believe it was Sunday. Okay. Now, the Neptune here also speaks to a measure of socialism for the people. So this suggests that anytime that sometime in the next month or so, people will start receiving their stimulus checks, socialism for the people. And while tropical astrologers are talking about that for Saturn going into Aquarius, we are still several years away from that because we'll probably see the socialism kicking in a greater level when Saturn gets there from the sidereal perspective. But for now, there's just talk of it and just a tease of it. So that it is a foreshadowing from the tropical measure of things to come, but it will not be fully implemented until the middle part of this decade. On some level, it'll be fully implemented into our capitalistic society. So we're going to see a measure of socialism infused into our capitalist society. And that's the future. That's the future because America is in her Pluto return and she's going to be fundamentally changed. And we are watching the very beginnings of that now. All right, we already talked about the sun in the 5th house. Let's skip over to the 6th house and focus on Uranus in the 6th with the square to the stellium of Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, all in the 3rd house. Now, the 6th house rules healthcare in general, the employment of the common people, enlisted members of the military, civil servants, the police, Red Cross, and public health. Well, gee whiz. This stuff just writes itself, man. It just writes itself. There's likely to be, on some level, discontentment amongst the people of the United States. There is likely to be, on some level, strikes or protests, and even indications of riots. Would not surprise me to see riots somewhere, perhaps in one of the heavy-handed areas where, again, blue city, blue state, blue city in a red state, blue state, or blue city in a blue state. This is where the riots and the protests will very likely occur. If you live in a red state or a red city, or even a place where it's largely Republican, you won't see. And I'm not saying this because I favor one side or another. This is just how it plays out. This is just how it plays out. In areas where it's a heavy Democratic base, that's where the riots are going to take place. That's where the protests will usually take place. It's not usually that case in red cities and red states. Okay, so let's watch for that. Let's watch for that. Also, there's going to be more reports of coronavirus and illnesses in general in the military and amongst the military ranks. Okay. Also, with the squares to Uranus, there is indications of accidents or explosions at sea. Possibly issues on one of the military hospital ships that's located in California, New York. I don't know that there are any in the Gulf Coast region, the Gulf states, or along the eastern seaboard aside from New York. I don't know that there are military hospital ships there, but there could be an issue on a hospital ship. Even one of the cruise ships that are at sea, there could be an issue with one of the cruise ships as well. But that's already been going on. Like I said at the top of this stuff is happening so fast that, this is my 3rd attempt at a video. I'm just going to go with it. So if some of this stuff has already taken place, fine. It is what it is. The next video will be a month in advance of the indication. So my next video is going to focus on May, but I'm going to do that long before we get to May, so I don't have that problem. All right. Again, issues with ships at sea, possibly issues with the hospital ships. Now, also with the Uranus square from Mars, we can expect new unexpected troubles for the government. There could be fights amongst the legislature. There could be, we could get videos from some foreign nation. You know how there have been those videos of a third world country and their legislators literally coming to blows Well, it would not shock me at all to see a new video along those lines, but there could also be some verbal sparring here in the United States amongst our legislatures in Washington, or even on a state level, or on a local level. This square to the third house from Uranus also is a third indication of illness and death amongst well-respected politicians and or elder statesmen. There's one ex-president still alive who is rather old, and that's Jimmy Carter. He's coming up on 100, so of course he's always in the crosshairs. However, Bill Clinton is not out of the question, and a former or present POTUS candidate is not out of the question. But this politician could be anybody. I'm just saying, because they are elderly, they're elder, and in some respects they are well respected. This is why I bring these guys up. However, it could be anyone, and it could also happen overseas as well. All right. Mars square Uranus is a classic indicator of an earthquake. All right. Classic indicator of an earthquake, because Saturn is involved too. Although Saturn won't be in as tight a square with Uranus as Mars will, there is an indication of an earthquake. So we could see a big earthquake sometime in the next 30 days. So let's see how that plays out. This also speaks to the potential of an explosion near or in a government building. The last time this square took place, I believe it was in 2017, there was a man in Georgia. He went to the state capitol and set himself ablaze. I mean, classic Mars. He was a former soldier, in fact, in his uniform, set himself ablaze. You know, this was the last time Mars was in Capricorn, about 2 years ago. All right, foreshadowing of this period. Okay, there could also be fights in public places, and by public places I mean government places. You know, there could be fights, there could be riots or protests at government buildings. You know, there could also be a spike in suicide, particularly in the military. The Pentagon issued a directive earlier this year to try to get on top of the military members committing suicide. I think that it had spiked in the Air Force, and so we could see that happen as well. Now, this suicide could also take place amongst an athlete, because Mars does rule athletes. So the suicide could take place amongst an athlete, perhaps a football player who's suffering from CTE, or a boxer who's suffering from CTE commits suicide. I don't know how it's going to play out. Let's see what happens. Okay. Again, there could be, well, not again, but for the first time, I'm going to tell you, there could be a resignation of a government official related to a scandal. Ooh, let's see what that is likely to be. That could be, again, it could be Joe Biden. It could be anybody. I don't know. There could be pressure put on a sitting senator or congressman because they divested stocks ahead of the crash, letting you know that they might have had inside information, you know, and under pressure, they resign and give up their Senate seat or their Congress seat. Who knows how this plays out, but it's a strong possibility, okay? Now, there could be a domestic attack, terrorist attack of some sort. There was just one already thwarted. There was a man who had attempted to set a hospital on fire, and he was killed over the weekend. So that's already an indication. Now, it's amazing how these things happen. You know, a lunation can kick off 2 weeks prior to it actually taking place, and they can last up to 30 days after it. You know, the books, when I started studying mundane astrology, the books I was studying would say the lunations are only active for 2 weeks, but that has not been the case over the last year. I've seen things take as long as 30, in some cases 45 days. And then last year I was in a lot of my blogs I was writing on Facebook. I was seeing month after month after month outbreaks being mentioned, you know, and in small pockets of the United States, there were some isolated outbreaks. but there was a bigger one indicated that actually took place in November and December. All right, so just like with that, I am seeing routinely the death of elder statesmen, the death of politicians, the death of writers indicated in multiple charts. So this is going to persist over a period of time, not just in this month. Now, one of these deaths could be of a world leader. You know, I called Mugabe's death last year. 4 days after I wrote it, Mugabe gave up the ghost. You know, so one of these elder statesmen could be a world leader, but it could also be a former POTUS or a POTUS candidate. It could be a monarch somewhere. It could be a dictator somewhere. It could be a king or queen somewhere. All right. We also may hear of a local election being postponed or canceled or altered in some way. Finally, Venus is in the 7th house of this chart and in the sign that she's going to retrograde. Now, I'm going to talk about the retrograde in another video, but for the purpose of this broadcast, we can see a spike in divorces, all right, with the Aries ingress on the 13th. We have a 7th house moon in Sagittarius, right? 7th house moon in Sagittarius. So we're going to see a spike in domestic violence. The quarter moon takes place tomorrow, and it's a 7th house moon in the quarter moon. I'm sorry, it's the sun square moon in the quarter moon, first quarter moon tomorrow, and this indicates conflicts between the masculine and the feminine. So if you got friends who are in relationships that are potentially violent, check on your friends. Check on your friends, because they could be going through a hard time. And my heart goes out to those children who are with narcissists, living with narcissistic parents, because those kids could catch hell right now. So if you got nieces and nephews who are with who has a parent that's a narcissist, or parents who's abusive, go get you check on your nieces and nephews, okay? Again, so we could see a spike in divorce. We can see with the Venus in a square to Neptune by sign, we could see some financial fraud indicated. There could be stories in the news about a financial fraud and a prominent woman. You know, a prominent woman could be one of these people, all right? Also, there could be, of course, this is the springtime, and a lot of times there are weddings planned. Well, those weddings are going to be postponed and delayed. The square, Venus in the 7th house also speaks to trouble in general for women. It leads us back to what I just said about domestic violence. Oh, to be a pilot today. Beautiful day. All right. There could be, now, while the stock market may fluctuate, there will be some sectors of the financial markets that are doing exceedingly well right now. If you are a savvy investor, there are some sectors that are actually going up, you know, even in this volatile market. But again, there's going to be some news later on, and I think the jobs report this weekend, Friday. I think the jobs report this weekend will give you guys an excellent opportunity for some shorts. All right, investors, you'll get some excellent opportunities for some shorts. And finally, with Venus here in the 7th house, the blue stocks, I think the blue chip stocks may do well during this time. That's all I got for this episode of Astrovisions. The next time you see me, we'll be talking about the Venus retrograde and the retrograde season in general. Retrogrades of Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn all take place within a few days of one another next month in May, and that will slow down the rate of the virus and allow us in select areas across the nation to start slowly going back to whatever normal is going to be. I don't know what that's going to be, but the world that we went to sleep to on any day in early March, I don't know that we're ever going to see that again. You know, towards the end of this month, I think we can anticipate sports leagues to start telling us when they will return. You know, we'll probably hear from baseball first, that they set a date for sometime in June to resume play. Some abbreviated version of basketball will come back as well, and possibly even hockey may come back as well. And we'll start to hear about those things late April and into May. All right. So until our next time, be safe and let's watch the news and see what happens. Peace.